I've just spent the past 3 days hiking through Finnish Lapland, and during that time I was staying in cottages with all the necessities, going for sauna, taking dips in the lake, and all of that was actually for free. And all that traces back to this Finnish or generally Nordic tradition called all men's rights or freedom to roam, or in Finnish, jokamiehenoikeudet, which means that you can go to any public or private land to camp or hike as long as you take care of it. Especially in the national parks, they have all these facilities that you can use. Welcome back to Peregrine. In this video, I'll show you some highlights of my latest hiking trip throughout Finnish Lapland, tell you all about this freedom to roam, what it means, where it comes from, and how you can take advantage of all the national parks in Finland. First, let me tell you about the hiking route that we took. So we went for a 3-day hike on the Hetta-Pallas summer hiking trail, and like many other spots in Finland, Hetta-Pallas route has different trails depending on the season and mode of transport. So you could also use like the mountain biking route, for example, or in the winter you have the cross-country skiing route, the snowmobile route. They even have more than that. We were there in late August, so no winter wonderland views as you can see, and we did miss the midnight sun by a few weeks, but we had these beautiful green landscapes all along the way with hints of red and yellow, really letting you know that autumn is near. In the more wind exposed areas, it was a lot more bare. In terms of temperatures, they're probably around 15 degrees Celsius during the day, so around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and about 10 degrees colder at night, so definitely single digit. In terms of traffic, my Finnish hiking mate thought it was crowded. We did run into like about a dozen people per day overall, but mostly at the sleeping cottages. I would say that the routes were very empty. We would run into people from time to time, but usually they were either going in the opposite direction or going the same way, but we were going at different speeds, and like really quickly we would lose sight of each other. So I would definitely recommend this hiking route if you're interested in exploring Lapland and you want to start with something a bit tough but not too challenging. It's a common route for locals, so not exactly off the beaten track, but it's really downright deserted if you compare to hiking routes in the Alps, for example. And more importantly, we didn't just see people, we saw reindeer. So let's get back to freedom to roam, which is the general public's right to certain public or privately owned lands, lakes, and rivers for recreation and exercise. You're also allowed to pick berries and mushrooms. So this right exists in a few different countries, either into written law or as a commonly shared value, and you will find it, for instance, in the Nordics. And people aren't exactly sure where it comes from because it has been around for even hundreds of years. But one thing we can guess is because of the tough climate really far up north, it really made sense to let people just kind of sleep where they could, start a fire where they could, fish what they could, just so that they could survive. So we can imagine that that's where it comes from, and that's why it still exists today. So what it looks like now is it makes it possible for people to go out and enjoy nature, with the caveat, of course, that you're respectful of the place and any facilities that are shared. So it's quite basic, you clean up after yourself. You usually have brooms in the cottages. You throw away any items in the trash bins. You replace any logs you've used to start a fire. So everyone is really responsible for keeping the place nice for whoever comes next. On the first night, we actually went for sauna and a dip in the lake. It's around 4 a.m. here, but it was already quite light out. And the sauna technically requires you to pay for a small fee to use it. I think it was around €8 that you can pay, on your phone or at one of the welcome checkpoints. Usually no one is there to check on your payment, but like everything else in the national park, the system is based on trust. Don't count on it on private land, but in the national parks, you can find cottages where you can sleep completely for free. Usually you'll find 2 cottages side by side, and there's one that can be rented. But the rule is that even if you hadn't rented it out and someone were there, you had an emergency, for instance, you're stranded in the snow, you would still be allowed to come in and warm up and go to sleep. So in those cottages, depending on the size, but some of them you could easily fit more than 20 people. People sleep on the bunk beds. They also sleep on the floor. But in times of COVID, the recommended limit is around 6. So I did notice though that most people seem to prefer sleeping outside in their tents. And for sure, like the soft ground would be a lot more comfortable than the harsh wooden beds. And I think a lot of people are really into hiking and they have this really high-end hiking equipment. So they want to use their tent. So makes sense. So besides the cottages, there are also restrooms that you can use. They even have a chute for sanitary products. You'll also find either a well with potable water or a stream nearby, and usually there's a note telling you to boil it before you start to drink it or use it in food. So in terms of what you still need to bring with you, you of course should pack food, some water, any essentials for sleeping and staying warm, but everything else is pretty much provided in the national parks. You can really feel that even if you did have an emergency, you would be able to find shelter and water. I also recommend that you bring some kind of carving knife. They're really easy to find in Finland, not just in camping situations, but in any kind of store. They're really popular for people to have at least one at home and then take it with them whenever it makes sense. And camping is definitely one of those situations. So you'll need a knife like that to do anything from opening food packaging to carving a fire starting stick. There's actually a word for that in Finnish. It's called kiehinen. So if you're going to go on a trip like this to Lapland or elsewhere, it's also a nice opportunity to learn about new tools or different ways of doing things and giving it a try. So just a few words about how prevalent it is to use this freedom to roam, specifically in Finland. So anecdotally, all the Finnish people I know do some kind of hiking, and most I think have even already been on this specific hiking route at least once. And I did see some articles that have also picked up on a trend during COVID of Finnish people spending even more time on hikes and more time in nature than usual. So I think in different places we can relate to that. You know, they need to go spend more time outside during all the lockdowns and so on. So the interest is definitely not going down, even though this is an old tradition. And without getting philosophical about the importance of nature to certain cultures, what this really shows, at least, is that the more accessible, comfortable, and safe you make these nature spots, the more people will actually use them. And it was nice to see also all along the path that things were being sort of upgraded all the time. We even saw some employees at the park coming to fix a window. So they're really careful about keeping the place nice, but still really wild. So they don't cut any trees down, for instance. It's still really nature, just a bit safer. Have you ever been on a hike in Lapland, or are you interested in trying it out? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more from me. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time.